right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Ben Swafford. I'm the Philly Chi Chair for 2021. It's really great to have you. This is another edition of Philly Chi hosting the World IA Day for Philadelphia. We've got 4 awesome talks lined up. So thank you all for being here and making the time to connect with us. I want to go over a few housekeeping items for the night. Note that you'll be muted by default and your video will be off. Please use the chat feature within Zoom for general discussion and comments. You can use the Q&A to post questions for our speakers. Note that to save time, we'll not be unmuting people for the Q&A. You can also use the like feature in the Q&A in order to upvote the questions that you'd like to be answered. And please note that this event will be recorded and shared online on our YouTube channel. Also, just want to thank you for any patience as we work through any potential technical difficulties or interruptions from pets or small children tonight. So if you're unfamiliar with Philly Chi, we're the local chapter of ACM SIG Chi, and we've been curating networking and educational events for UX professionals, students, and enthusiasts for over 15 years. We're dedicated to UX knowledge sharing, and we couldn't do it without you spending your time with us. So we thank you for making it possible. We're also committed to supporting a respectful environment for our members to come together and talk UX. So if you witness any unacceptable behavior during tonight's event, please notify a board member in the chat or reach us via email. We also encourage all attendees to read our code of conduct, which is located on our website. All right, this is our awesome board for this year. So our new slate, it's our first event for 2021. You'll be meeting most of these board members throughout the night. I want to give a quick shout out to Remy, who unfortunately can't be here. We also want to shout out last year's board one more time, especially our outgoing chair, Chong Nguyen, who I'm sure is out there listening. He's stuck around to make this transition as smooth as possible these couple of months. So I want to thank you, Chong, and Christine, Lorraine, Michelle, Dar. Thanks for getting Philly Chi through crazy 2020. All right, I'll pass it over to Raisha.
Hey guys, so tonight we have 4 speakers and each will get dedicated few minutes for question and answers. We do have to go through a lot, so we apologize in advance if we can't get through to every question. And please stick around until the end of the event because then we'll announce our raffle winners. Ben, can you go to the next slide?
Got it.
Yeah, so for tonight's event, we have these 3 awesome books from Rosenfeld. As I mentioned before, our winners will be announced at the end of the call, and we'll be reaching out to the winners to collect your address so that we can send you a physical copy of the book. And this year, we also have some bonus raffles. So the World IA Day organizers have also organized a few raffle prizes that will be given away at the end of the night as well. So moving on to the next slide, which is job time. So for those of you who are joining a Philly Chi event for the first time, we have job time at every event to connect job seekers with companies that are hiring. And since we're a local chapter, so we'll be only focusing on Philly roles. So I'll start with people and companies that are hiring. So if you're a part of a Philly-based company and you have role or roles open, please drop a link to those roles in the chat. And also, like if you want to explain what your company does and what kind of roles are open, please raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can talk to the audience. I can see one.
Are you able to
no, can you do it then?
Okay, I'm gonna have to, okay. Sorry, my Zoom is not letting me see my mouse, so. All right, Sarah.
All right, everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, hi, my name is Sarah Hall. I'm the user experience practice lead with the City of Philadelphia. We are located in the Office of Innovation and Technology, and we are hiring a UX designer. And that is hopefully being posted in a few days, but if you would like to reach out to us via our email. It's user.experience@phila.gov. And I also want to share the position from the Service Design Studio, who the Director of Strategic Design, Leanna Dragaman, is also on this call, but I'll skip having her come on as well. They're hiring a senior design researcher, and that job posting should go up this week as well. So if they have questions, they can email service design or service.design@phila.gov. And I'll post both of those emails in our chat as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? There is
I'm
another one.
seeing
Ben.
Mike Gadsby's raising his hand.
Never mind. So Mike Gadsby, 03. We are hiring for a slew of positions, most directly UX strategist. I'll post the link to our job descriptions in the chat here. But yeah, hit me up if you're looking for a new gig.
Great. I just unmuted Travis.
Hey there, folks. Travis McDonald here. I work for JPL Integrated Communications out in Harrisburg. We are looking for a digital content writer and UX writer for our firm out here, and willing to look at telecommuting and certainly remote opportunities for anyone in the Philly area.
Okay, so now I'll move on to the job seekers. If you are looking for a job right now, please feel free to reach out to these individuals and company who have shared open roles tonight. And also you can share your LinkedIn profile and also your portfolio if you want in the chat below. So now I'll pass on to Ben Dolly.
Hey guys, I'm Benjamin Dolly here. I am the other Ben on the Philly Chi board for this year, and I am the treasurer. And I have the express privilege of giving a shout out to our 2021 annual sponsors, Think Company, 03 World, Rosenfeld Media, and Vanguard, as well as a super big shout out to tonight's event sponsor, Eastern Standard, of which we have David Kay in the house from Eastern Standard. So I will turn the mic over to him.
Hey, happy World IA Day, everyone. My name is David Kuziak, and I'm the design team lead at Eastern Standard, and we're really excited to be sponsoring this year's event. So Eastern Standard is a branded digital agency. We work with a range of clients in arts and heritage, nonprofit, education, consumer goods, and professional services. We are looking for contract UX strategists and designers to partner with on a variety of projects. So if you're interested, you can check out the career section on our website at easternstandard.com, and I'll also drop a link in the chat to those job descriptions as well. I hope you all enjoy tonight's event.
Cool. Thank you so much, David. Ben, if you will kindly get us on to the next slide. I wanted to announce our next upcoming event, March 23rd. It is another panel event called So You Want a Job During COVID. Here we will explore different ways that hiring has changed with different hiring managers in panel format, and super looking forward to it. The panel will be moderated by Phil Sharon from Think Company and includes hiring managers from Habitat Logistics, Comcast, Think Company, and Twitter. So we look forward to seeing everybody there. And without further ado, I will turn it back over to the other Ben to get this event started.
Thanks, Ben. All right. So World IA Day, this year's theme is curiosity. Just want to read a little bit about what the organizers say about curiosity. Curiosity means to be prepared to go on a journey of which you do not know the outcome, to challenge what you and others think you have known so far, to change perspective and perceive other points of view. So each of tonight's speakers will touch on this theme in some way. And quick kudos to the World IA Day global organizers for putting this on. All of us here today are part of this event that is happening across the world over the next several days in 50 locations, 24 countries. So pretty cool. And here at our local Philadelphia event, which I'm sure is the best one of all of them, we have 4 great speakers lined up for you. The first is Julie Guinn. Head of UX Research Strategy and Operations at Dell Boomi. Lyndon Cerejo, who's the Senior Manager of UX at Capgemini, excuse me. We also have Megan Moser, former Philly Chi Chair and currently UX Strategist at City of Philadelphia. And Mike Gadsby, who's the CIO at O3 World. So thank you all for being part of this awesome event. And Julie, I did promote you up to panelist. So if you're there, we can get started with you.
All right, fantastic. Well, I guess I will just share my screen. Let me get this over here. See. Oh, it's on the wrong screen. Ta-da!
Perfect.
All right, so what data does when no one's looking? Or tales from the data closet. And I know that every company has one of these. Maybe it's an old SharePoint, maybe it's, you know, the folder, your old team folder that you haven't rolled over since you moved to the new server, you know, your dusty backend database. Every company has them. And over my career, I've had a number of chances to go into the data closet and see what's going on in there. Yeah, so a few of the projects I'll go over. There was, when I worked at Mint, we had an exit survey that people were very good about finding, you know, analyzing all the data from the questions, but then there was a like, anything else you want to tell us box that nobody ever looked in. So one day I looked in it to see what people were telling us. At Boomi, we did a project just looking at how people switch accounts, but as part of that had to understand how people named their accounts. So we had to go into the back end and look at all the account names in Boomi. When I worked on QuickBooks, they sort of had these, they were able to see how the different QuickBooks businesses were exchanging data, but they didn't really know what these sort of, they looked like networks, but they didn't know what they were. An ethnographic field research project where at the end of it, they just dumped 3,300 photos into a folder and never looked back. And then a project at Jefferson where we rebuilt or tried to rebuild a database that probably hadn't been touched since like the mid 90s. So when you go into the data closet, some things that I guarantee you will find. Hacks and workarounds. So in addition to finding out that your users put everything in the notes field, or that they're using file names for all their metadata needs, you will also find two of my favorite, which is people trying to put things in order, people trying to pin the most important things, and people trying to set up templates for themselves. So people putting a 1 or an A or a hashtag or a Z if they want it at the bottom. People basically making a copy of their account that they remove all the data from so that then they can create copies of it. So you'll definitely see a lot of that in the data closet. Pathological capitalization, I call this the Microsoft Word change case phenomenon. Basically, if there's a way that you can type, people will type that way. No spaces, capitalizing the first word, not capitalizing any of the words, toggle case, contractions, basically anything that you let people type in, they will type it in any way they can, and there will always be that person that will type in all caps, and I don't know why. Always some private moments of candor. You'll find people sort of breaking the third wall and talking to you. People showing a little bit of flair with a smiley face, with a hello world reference, maybe a little snarky. Yeah, we call them honorary, but they're semi-retired. I like this one. Couldn't put a company name here because of some kind of LinkedIn problem. And then sometimes you find almost poetry. This was for the looking through the Mint survey and what analysis they had done. And this was in the PowerPoint deck, which apathy really is our biggest competitor. I think that's true. I think that's true for all of us. In the photo study, something we found when we looked through those 3,300 photos was all over the world, apples and bananas. That's what people take to work. That is their desk fruit. You'll also find vestigial organs and organizational scar tissue. So check boxes from the days when modem was a way of contacting someone. Things in the nav that don't exist anymore, but they can't take them out. Weird things that happened on the back end, like having a major data issue in QuickBooks, resulting in a replication failure. And now there are hundreds of read-only copies there forever. Or this was funny when we were working on Boomi. You can see here, this is actually the founder. So here are his initial Boomi accounts from whenever this was, 2012, back in the day, or 2011. So that was funny. Rick Nucci was the founder. And also a lot of just like, I don't even know what happened here. So some kind of phishing scam that accidentally spawned a Boomi account and named it, hello, your credit card is about to expire. I don't know what happened on this site visit. These people have a really nice cat. And yes, this thing is a single drop-down menu of all the board certifications a doctor can have. That is a lot of board certifications. I don't know what's going on in there. People that you will meet in the data closet, the window shoppers, people just setting up a trial account, testing it out, seeing what's going on. They couldn't be bothered, so I'm just going to bang on my keyboard, and that's going to be my account name. The hoarders, people that don't need something, want to get rid of it, but just can't manage to let it go. And perhaps I like this one, oops, get increasingly strident about it. And then finally, all right, so there's lots of funny stuff in the data closet, but what can you actually gain from going into these places that no one has looked for a while? And I found there's actually a lot to gain. So when we did that photo study, there were so many neat things in there and we found so many patterns, we actually ended up making a little brainstorming toolkit. One of the patterns we saw was looking across all the pictures, people in meetings, they invariably had what we started calling their to-go pack next to them. Which was basically, it was like their phone stacked on top of their wallet, stacked on top of their ID, stacked on top of maybe a notebook, and it sat there and you saw people carrying it around and putting it on the desk, putting it on the table. So themes like that we pulled together and made a little brainstorming toolkit. You know, what could a to-go pack mean for our product? How do you make things easy to carry around? You can see latent opportunities. So in that Mint survey, they had analyzed all the sort of quantitative multiple choice questions, you know, and found out that the reason that people start Mint and then kind of abandon halfway through the account process was, you know, they were concerned about security. They wanted to learn a little bit more about the service. They were having problems adding their account. So all straightforward stuff, you know, and they made to-dos and assigned them to people apparently. But when I went through the, you know, anything else you want to tell us stuff, you got a whole nother level, which do I not have it? Oh. Which was people talking about the reason that they abandoned it was, oh, well, I wanted to use this with my kid, or, oh, I want to have my spouse there. We want to do it together. We want to talk about things. And so there was one of the things that came out of that sort of reanalysis was actually one of the things people come to Mint, they see what it is, but it's not personal finance, it's interpersonal finance. And so we need some way to allow them to bring other people into that sign up experience. And then finally, you can get fresh perspectives. So in the Mint study, when we were going through all the, or in the QuickBooks study, when we were going through all the networks, you know, people started out thinking like, okay, a network, it's made up of people, they're connected, they have some kind of relationship with one another. But we dug into these and found out that actually what was going on was quite a bit more complicated. There was a lot more dimensions to these, the way these small businesses were interacting, so that if Intuit really wanted to start fostering a real network, they were going to have to take sort of a much more sophisticated approach than just, oh, these two businesses are connected, I guess they want to be friends. And so that is Tales from the Data Closet, and what your data does when it's not looking, and what you can learn from it. And that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Julie.
I
Anybody
hate
has
to have
any?
the 15 minutes. I could.
That was efficient.
Right.
Yeah, that was so great. Unfortunately, it's hard to hear the applause on Zoom, so people, please post your kudos in the chat.
It's true. Zoom needs an applause feature.
Yeah.
Do canned applause.
If anybody has any questions, we have a few minutes to answer. Give it a few minutes to see if anything pops up here.
So I just got a question in the chat. Julie, what tips do you have for digging into the messy data?
Oh, yes. Good question, Nina. First of all, set aside a little bit of time, and then go into it with an open mind and really look. Two of the things that I find when you're digging into it is, one, you're sort of connecting with this sort of, I think of them as like our digital ancestors, the people that produced this database, the people that took these pictures. And so, you know, being sort of putting yourself in their shoes, being open to what, you know, the sort of the wisdom of our ancestors, that there's probably a reason that they did this. They didn't just, you know, make a drop-down menu with 45 items in it because they thought that was a good idea. Yeah, so I think being open to seeing things through the eyes of the people who might have made this, yeah, and setting aside some time, I'd say.
That's awesome. I have a question that popped up in the Q&A from Travis, who says, what was the hands down strangest thing you've encountered in the data closet?
I mean, one thing I was delighted by was it was on the provider directory thing, and in terms of like getting in touch with our ancestors and why did they do this, and there was a middle name field, but instead of letting people type in a letter, it was actually a drop-down menu with each letter of the alphabet, and you could select it. And I was like, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I would say in the QuickBooks project, to try to understand these networks, at one point I was driving around a lot in Google Street View, which is really interesting. I mean, you can drive around the whole country. You know, so I was driving around this little town visiting all the businesses in this network just to see if there was anything to see. And Google Street View, something about like the coloring and the resolution, it's just really depressing. It makes every town look like some kind of post-apocalyptic wasteland. That's what I learned in that study. But it's a cool resource.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who just tools around Google Street View sometimes.
You're like, oh, this is an interesting little town in Ohio. All right, go to the gas station.
So I have a question in the chat from Maria Cipollone. Hey, Maria, who says, how did you prioritize time in your work life to do this retrospective?
So interestingly, the photo study one, that was sort of a pitch, because that was not, no one was doing anything with those photos. That was not like, yes, Julie, you're on this nasty folder project. So that one was a pitch that I was like, we have to do this. And you just look out into the future, you see your schedule, you see a little bit of time coming, and you just hold that time free for yourself. But all the other ones, this was actually just parts of projects. So just making sure to be like, you know what, we're going to have to do a content inventory. We're going to have to go through this database and like see what all the fields are, because, we need to know how it works so we can know what the interface can surface or not. Yeah, just build it into the study. Make it, because you can learn from it. That's the thing. It's not like you're just going to go off farting around being like, look at this funny thing I found. The funny things are sort of what makes it a joy to go into the data closet, I would say. Focus on the value.
That's great. Got another question in the Q&A. So thoughts on how old is too old for data to be considered useful? Thanks, Laura.
Never is old. And someone, I think I saw in the chat, someone was saying they were like a part-time archivist or something, especially for the sort of like just provocative, like just seeing things different, getting a new frame, like seeing a picture that's just sort of mysterious and you don't know what's going on. Like in the photo study, a lot of the pictures were just of like a random corner of an office with nothing in it. But when you put them all together, it was sort of poetry of like these lonely sort of liminal spaces in the office. Yeah.
That's great. All right, got a couple more questions here, I think. So one of them is, was any info especially actionable to improve customer experience and engagement?
Probably the Mint one had, because it was survey data, so we had a lot of it. And the whole point of it was, we're still having this problem with people falling out of the like account setup process. So, like let's keep digging. We have not solved it. Maybe we can go back to that survey. That one I think had the most direct, like, no, there's all these other pain points going on here. It goes a lot deeper than just like, I wanted to learn more about your service. It was, there were things like, it wasn't so much that they wanted to learn more, it's that the first page is all about security and you're in control. And then the next page is tell me all your data and I want you to type in all your bank account numbers and I want you to connect everything, so we were sort of setting people up to be like, whoa, maybe I want to learn a little more about the service first. Yeah, so definitely actionable stuff.
That's so great. Thanks, Julie. I think that's all the questions I've seen that I've collected from the chat. It is easier on this end if you post them directly into the Q&A, but I am trying to get the ones in the chat. I have a question though, since the theme this year's World IA Day is curiosity, I wondered if you have anything you'd like to share about how curiosity guides this. I
don't know if you could call yourself a researcher if when you see an abandoned qualitative data set laying around, if you're not like, I have to look, I have to see what's in there. Yeah, I feel like that is the core of research, is just the desire to know, and that, yeah, there's always to tell a story. And if you get a qualitative data sets, there's just so many stories, and my God. Awesome. And some of them are useful and some of them are just people holding a weird cat. And you're like, I don't know, but that's great. Was that a picture on their desk? Like, I don't understand why we have a picture of this, considering it was a study about offices.
That's amazing. Okay, well, Julie, thank you so much. This has been such an awesome talk. Really appreciate it. All right, with that, I think we can turn it over to Lyndon. You ready for us, Lyndon?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, starting to share my screen. Let me know when you see this. All right, so thank you for having me. after Perseverance landed on Mars last week, I was happy that there are a set of people still interested in talking about the design of Curiosity. And so we've got this schematic here. Just kidding, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about evoking and feeding curiosity through design. I've got a few examples here that we can talk about how companies are using curiosity in our day-to-day lives. Now, my name is Lyndon Cerejo. I lead user experience design in Capgemini's digital customer experience practice. I'm glad to be here with you today. So like Julie said, I do have a closet of pictures, and this resides on my phone. The only reason I upgrade my iPhone is when they increase the memory, because I keep reaching capacity. So if you can see, these are pictures of my two kids, thing one and thing two. I helped make them. And as children, we are very curious. You know, saw them grow up. They're always experimenting, running to the kitchen. The guy on the left, thing one, grabbed a slice of lime, as you can see there, and that's him after biting it. The middle one, he's grabbed an onion, and me being interested in taking pictures, took his picture instead of stopping him from eating it. Let him learn to be curious there. And then the little one on the right there is exploring things by himself in coals. Now, you can see they continued being curious, but as we grow up, we start losing a little bit of that curiosity. There's a saying that goes, curiosity killed the cat. And that's only half of it, though. The other half is satisfaction brought it back. So when people, their curiosity is satisfied, they keep being more curious. And it's good to know that there are some fields where curiosity is encouraged, is very important. And there was a study done by the Merck group a couple of years ago, and they found that people in scientific R&D, manufacturing, and technology tended to be more curious than other professions. So I like to think of designers as being part of that last group of people, the technology people. Now, if you think of it, we've got the user researcher here, we've got the IA, you've got a visual designer, copy person, you've got interaction designer, front-end coder, manager, and of course the unicorn who does everything, right? And looking at the habits, to be a good designer, you need to use your head, your heart, and your hands to, to make things work and make things work for people. And curiosity is one of them, one of those habits or behaviors that you need to have. But there isn't just one type of curiosity. So if you look at Daniel Berlyne, was a psychologist from the 1950s who talked about a model of curiosity, and he went across two different axes. So if you look at it, one axis went from diversive on one end, which is the desire to explore, to learn new things, look for something novel, to very specific curiosity. So you're looking for a very specific answer. On the other axis, we went from perceptual, which is being aroused by something that's puzzling, something that's novel, to to being epistemic, which is what we associate with always looking to learn, explore, and learn some knowledge from there. Now, let me try to explain these with some examples. So let's start at the bottom left quadrant here. When you're talking about diversive curiosity and perceptual in this quadrant here, an example would be social media sites like Facebook. So you're looking for novel stimulation. You can go to Twitter and pull down to refresh, and you keep getting stimulated with new pieces of content all the time, something to keep you occupied there. If you take that same type of curiosity on the diversive axis, but now start looking to learn things, to explore a little bit, and this is not necessarily for a specific topic, this is diversive still, right? So TED Talks is a good example. This is where you're going. You can go to a site, you have experts there, short talks, multiple topics. You can go and learn about curiosity on one side. You can go and learn about maybe art and culture on the other side. So there's a lot of things that you can learn on a site like TED Talks. Moving on, if you look at epistemic, so we're still now focusing on knowledge, but this is deep knowledge in a particular area. An example of that would be Google Scholar, ResearchGate, sites like that. You're looking for very in-depth knowledge. You could spend, an afternoon or maybe days searching for information, getting research papers on any topic that you need to. And finally, there's the last quadrant, which is you're looking for very specific information because you're puzzled by something or you have, a question. So for example, I may, I did this, I asked, hey, Google, Cortana, Alexa, Siri, how tall is Mount Everest?
According to Mount Everest is 29,029 feet above sea level.
All right. As you can realize, Cortana was the one that got it wrong. No wonder Microsoft's killing her off. But we do have, ways to get quick answers to your questions that you have. But there isn't, so if you look a little more, so I'm trying to get this out of the way. So if we start focusing on this quadrant, I've got a few more examples here. Let's look at the diversive and perceptual curiosity thing. So BuzzFeed's one example like that. You have novel stimulation. Each time you go there, you'll find new content. They've got headlines that pull you in, make you want to click in and see. There's other things that, keep you coming back there. Another example where they use puzzling stimuli is CNBC, and a lot of news sites do this as well. So this is about the lottery. There's one way to increase the odds of winning. So naturally, you're going to want to click on that and find out that one way is, well, buying more tickets. But if you're like me, it's just buying one ticket in the first place. A couple of other sites here. You've got Stitch Fix, which is a site that has something they call automatic fixes. You can sign up on a subscription basis here. You can talk about the type of clothes that you like, but you get a surprise box in the mail every 3 weeks or so. And, it's getting a novel stimulation there. Hey, there's a package. Unlike all my orders from Amazon, I don't know what's in this one. Let me find out if it's something I like or I need to return it back. And then finally, Woot. I don't know how many people remember Woot, but they used to have this bag of crap. And it's ambiguous because you have no idea what's coming in. It could be a bunch of cables, or it could be a laptop or an iPad, which very few people have gotten from Woot. Now, if you move on to the diversive and epistemic, this is where you're exploring and trying to learn new things. We talked about TED already, TED Talks. Another example is Quora. So you can set it up, in my case, I've set it up with a lot of user experience related things, but they do try to sneak in other things on the side to also get you distracted. So you could start off on this end of the axis at the top there, trying to explore knowledge just specifically around user experience, but get distracted and go down the perceptual path there. Another example that we have is from the Google's year-end search. If you haven't seen it, you should look at it for 2020. They've got a great design here that allows you to see different cards about what people were searching for last year. And you can see some of these examples on the right. If you're interested in learning more, curious about things, you can expand it, get more information. After you're done with one category, you can say, hey, I'm interested in looking at something beneficial. I'm looking for something in a fashion category. And they kind of get you, to play around and explore on their site. Now let's move to the third quadrant here. So this is the epistemic and very specific topic. You're looking for in-depth knowledge on a particular topic. Sites like NNG, Nielsen Norman Group's blog, has a lot of good information here. So you get, and they give it free for most part. So you do have information or content, you have videos, you have articles, great job there. But they do drive purchases. So if you are trying to get more information on, information architecture, for example, they will try to sell their reports, try to sell online conferences that they've recorded. So you can go, so they do provide you information, you need to go deeper. They sell you additional things. Forrester does the same thing, and LinkedIn Learning on the right. They do give you previews, so you can get a taste for it. And then if you really want to go deeper, you sign up for the course or subscribe to it. One more example for the specific epistemic curiosity. Think of how you can progressively get users through a site. And this is one example on Mint's blog. And you can see how long it is. But you start off at the top with a simple retirement calculator. And these things get people because they want to know, how much money do I need to retire? And then the next question, when they give you the answer, are you falling short? What can I do about it? And there's a whole set of content that talks about that. You've got FAQs, you've got how do I compare to other people in my age group? And then ultimately they try to say, okay, we can help you. Here's the app you can download from the Google Play Store or from iOS Apple Store and manage and maintain your finances there. When it comes to specific perceptual curiosity now, these are some examples. You get these all the time. So there's Kohl's on the left, President's Day sale. You get this email and kind of scratches off. There's Old Navy in the middle. You have to click on it. They take you to the site and you see, well, I only got a 10% discount. There's Adidas in the middle. I've got another example, so I'll skip that one for now. And then finally, there's Best Buy on the right. It says, got this email that says you may have $5,000 in certificates. And the trick is you have to go into the store and buy something, scan your reward code, and that's when you'll find out how much it was. I ended up getting $5. But it's still a way for people, they get people interested in finding out, okay, how much could I have gotten, and take some action on it. Here's another example from the Lunar New Year that happened recently. They sent out, this is Adidas again, they sent out an email. You click on it, takes you to the site. You actually scratch with your finger, and it does show you your discount there, but it gets you interested, gets you intrigued enough to click and take some action there. Some more examples for specific perceptual. This is the first example that we have on this slide here. This is more of a minimum advertised price requirement, but you do see sites where they don't show you the price. And you're looking at two computers side by side. There's one that had a list price of $14.99, but that's struck through. You need to add it to your cart to see what it is. Now, will I get a better deal with that one, or should I stick with the $13.99 one? Another example is Overstock. So you have a spin the wheel there, and you may end up with one of these discounts as long as you give them your email. And finally, there's Progressive. We all, Progressive got famous when they started saying, we'll not only tell you our rates, but we'll give you a chance to see how these other, how our rates stack up with other competitors. So you get to see 3 or 4 different companies. So you have a question, how much am I getting, or how much will I be saving if I do this? And they get you to get in there and look at it. So how do you stay curious? The way I see it is you have focused curiosity. So you're trying to answer a very specific question. You may be on a project, you're doing some sort of research, and you need to figure that out. That's very focused curiosity, because you first of all have to acknowledge, well, I may not know everything. And I think that opens the door for you to be able to learn. You can go online, learn a lot of things, but like we all know in our practice, it's best to go actually ask questions. You don't know something, ask questions, get the answers, ask people. When you are doing ethnographic research, you ask people, you observe people and get those learnings from there. And then start connecting the dots. I've learned this, this is what I have done in the past, here are the answers that I have, and see how you can bring them all together to apply and come up with a better solution for everyone. That's one type, a very focused curiosity. The other part is open exploration. So this is where you are trying to learn new things. I think the TED Talks example is a great one there. Think of curiosity as a muscle. You do need to exercise that constantly. And you're doing this just for the joy of learning. So, save some time aside as idle thinking time. So not always be, I'm guilty of this as well, but not always be hooked to your device or your laptop or your phone, but keep some time to think, read things, and be open to different views. And that's very important. I think we touched upon this in the earlier talk. You need to be, interacting with people, get different views from people, and assimilate all of that. So that's largely what I had for you today. There are 2 books that I would recommend if you're interested in learning more about curiosity. There's Why on the left-hand side, and then there's Curious here. Great books, and you'll learn a lot more about curiosity there. If you're curious about me, my website's out there, and I am glad to take any questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, that's great, Lyndon. Thank you so much. I love learning about the curiosity model. It's really thought-provoking. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A. Give it a few minutes. I was curious, Lyndon, is the Daniel Berlyne, his model of curiosity? I've heard that mentioned a couple of times recently. Is that something that you've known about for some time, or is that?
Yeah, I've been studying these designerly habits for a couple of years now, and then when I was reading these books, that's where I came across it, and that's how I first heard about it. So that was my timer. Yeah, that's where I came across it. It's been around for a while. It's popular, but I think the jury's still out on curiosity. People are still studying. I recently read about there are 5 types of people when you think of curiosity, and one of them is a thrill seeker. That also qualifies as a different category. So I don't think there's a firm answer, but this model I think works well for us to understand curiosity. That's why I kind of used it in the talk today.
Great, thank you. Seeing a couple of kudos coming in.
There was one question. I presented this internally in our company as well. In case there's no other questions, I can ask one of the questions that came up there.
That'd be great.
All right, so people were asking about how can I encourage curiosity in my own team, on my projects and things like that. And I think the first step is to, if you're a lead, is to create this atmosphere of there's no such thing as a stupid question. So encourage people to ask that question. You can do that often by asking questions yourself. And I was on a call today where, there was an executive and he asked what seemed like, a very silly question in terms of, okay, we're having these prizes for something. He said, remind me again how this goes. Not that I'm participating, but maybe other team members don't know. And, that got people open and asking questions. So that's one trick also that you can use to do that.
I love that. Thanks, Lyndon. Getting a lot of great presentations, enjoyed the model of curiosity. Just making sure that okay, here we go. From Craig. As a designer, how do you decide where in the spectrum you should be designing if you're designing for a client or a specific project?
Excellent. I did have a slide on that, but I cut it out because I thought we'd run out of time. So I think the first step is look at this, the different axes that you have and see what you are trying to encourage or your clients trying to encourage in that case. A lot of the time it may be, if you're designing something that's very, deep in knowledge. So an example would be your NNG or Forrester. If those are your clients, you'll probably be in the top right quadrant there. You're focusing on epistemic and specific curiosity. And your range would cover, like NNG is strictly about user experience design, but in that you have information architecture, usability, all sorts of things in there. If, on the other hand, you are trying to keep people on your site, you've got a social media like thing, it's at the other extreme there. You need to keep people entertained. You need people hooked and coming back. And a lot of books on why you should be doing it and should not be doing it and the ethics of it. But in short, look at behaviors that you could. So figure out where you need to be addressing your client's attention and then design tactics based on that. And we looked at some of the tactics that people use here. Did that answer your question?
I think so. Can't speak for Craig, but that makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate the specific examples. Nielsen Norman Group's website, for example, that really brought it home. Got one question from Mike Takatz who says, do you use ResearchGate a lot?
Oh, I do. So it often starts off as a Google search for something, and then I find that you do have access to a lot of information on there that you may not get in other places. So Google Scholar, ResearchGate, I tend to use those two. If it's something, there's other research, there'll be other specific sites that we'd go to. We have subscriptions to our company, but if I'm doing general research, I start off and get those sites from there, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so we've got a couple that have come in through the Q&A here. One's from Laura. How might you apply those types of curiosity to informing a research recruitment screener? Does it matter to screen on these things?
Research recruitment screener. Okay, so this is for your research participants, I'm guessing. I think at the top of my head, I would say, again, try to see what type of, not just behavior, but, we have personas that we recruit. We say, okay, we're trying to get people in this, user group and match this type of persona. and the behavior. So it's a combination of who you're trying to get and the behavior that you want. And I think at the intersection of that, you'd figure out, okay, do I want someone who is, you can use some of these site examples here to think of the type of people. You can ask them, do you use social media sites a lot? How much time do you spend? So some of that would drive how they use, the websites and get that information. Or if you're looking for someone who's, deep into academic research, there are some questions that you'd already ask off the top of your head, but some things would be, explain to me how you'd use Google Scholar or something like that. That would probably get you a better set of people there.
Awesome, thank you.
I did see one question here. Do you think too much curiosity could lead to frustration? Definitely. All these examples, these are not from one site. So they are from different sites and at different points in time. I've been collecting them. So yes, if you put all these together, it's going to be messy. But then again, you have some sites that, I always go back to social media sites. They thrive on you, getting that novel stimulation going. So their job is basically to do just that. So for them, I think the way they deliver it doesn't keep you frustrated or doesn't get users frustrated there.
Excellent. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. There are about 3 in the Q&A, so if you wouldn't mind going through and answering the others afterwards. But the first one here that I can ask now is, are there different UX expectations of different seekers in the curiosity quadrant? I'm thinking of a transactional versus consultation spectrum, maybe.
So are the expectations from the users? Absolutely. So I think I'd go back to the Quora example that I had, right? I set it up so that I'm very focused on getting knowledge on maybe 1 or 2 topics, so within the user experience realm. But then they do start showing you other things around the place. Now, you can get people hooked onto that. So you've addressed their questions. You do have, I did have one screenshot that had just one of my questions up there, but everything else was, hey, look at this. Hey, sign up for this. Hey, get this piece of information as well. So remind me again, did I answer that question or was it something else?
So the question is, are there different UX expectations of different seekers in the curiosity quadrant?
So there would be different expectations. So if I'm going in to do something and a site's trying to get me to do something else, that's their business model. It would frustrate me to some extent. I have certain expectations. I'm going only to do this. If I don't get any of my questions at all and it's all other topics there, that would not meet my expectations. I think like the previous question, I'd be frustrated there.
Excellent. All right. Well, Lyndon, thank you so much. This was a great presentation, and thanks for being part of the event tonight.
Thank you.
All right, Megan Moser, kick it over to you if you're ready for us.
Yes, I'm ready. I've just had my cats herded into another room, so I think I'm ready to go. All right, can you see my screen okay?
Yep, looks great.
Great. Get my Zoom window out of the way. All right, great. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm excited to be here. I'm Megan, and let me get my screen. There we go. I'm Megan, and I'm excited to talk about my curiosity on the topics of leadership and design. And I want to start out my talk tonight by sharing a little bit about my background to better frame these topics. I consider myself a very curious person by nature. That's a trait I found really common in folks in UX. And I'm literally interested in everything. So that made it challenging for me to find a career that felt like a good fit. My journey to UX took me through a lot of different industries and roles. I had done my undergrad in human services, and I started out on that path. But then I was drawn to work in other spaces that enabled me to take ideas and bring them into the world. So I was doing work around launching new initiatives, programs, and services. Back in about 2015, I was working at the leadership program at the Wharton School. And was working on designing and running experiential leadership development programming for students. And it was about that same time that I first learned of UX and human-centered design. And I started to realize how well design connected kind of all of my interests and experiences. So I decided to shift my career in that direction. And as I began to learn more and more about design, I started to notice a lot of parallels between the work I was doing in leadership development and the design process. And I became increasingly curious about this. And that journey and exploration is what I'm here to talk about tonight. So in my talk, I'm going to explore these parallels by looking at some definitions, some frameworks and applications, and then pull it all together with some takeaways that I hope you'll be able to use on your own journeys, wherever you are in your career as you think about your own leadership development. So one of the first parallels I noticed between leadership and design was in the definitions of the words themselves. You know, language is really important. The words we use and the meaning we ascribe to those words shape how we think and interact with the world around us. So leadership and design, or leader and designer, many people have strong preconceived notions about these words, what they mean, who fits the mold, and people often assume that they are innate abilities. It's something you're born with. You either have it or you don't. But through my work, I learned to think of them as skill sets or competencies that can be grown and developed. So some of us may start off naturally stronger in certain areas, but fundamentally both leadership and design skills can be developed by following a structured discipline process. And I'll get into that process in a little bit. The second thing about these words is they're also all about action. You know, leadership is really an act. It's not a title or a position or a thing you aspire to be someday. It's what you do. And that's the same with design. While design does produce products or experiences, it's fundamentally an act as well. It's about solving problems or bringing something into the world that didn't exist before. You know, it's about achieving goals within constraints. The last word I want to kind of talk about and put in context is leadership development. And that refers to the process that helps expand a person's capacity to serve and perform in leadership roles. That's a bit broad, so I'll put up here some examples of the competencies we focused our programming on at Wharton. So things like influence, emotional intelligence, teamwork, communication, decision-making, diplomacy, and cultural awareness. These leadership skills are fairly universal across industries and functions, but you know, they may be very different from the technical design skills that get you in the door, you know, in your first in your first position as a designer. But if you want to grow into a design leader and take on challenges like managing others, leading teams, setting strategy, you know, driving change at the organizational level through design, then these leadership skills become as important, if not more important, than your design skills. Now, moving on, I'm going to walk through some of the frameworks that I learned and used in my work in leadership development. One of the core aspects of Wharton's approach to leadership development that I learned and worked on was experiential learning and this concept of stretch experiences. So that's where I'll be focusing most of this talk, but I want to kind of make a side note here and make it very clear that this is just one specific angle on leadership development. It's certainly not the only way, and you know, there's other ways to do this, and this is very focused on individual actions. So, you know, considering context, organizational culture, and systems, that's really important because they all have a huge impact on our careers and our trajectories, you know, especially in tech and design where women and people of color face a lot of bias. So I want to acknowledge that and be very clear that while this doesn't attempt to solve those larger problems, these are still really effective tools for our personal progress. So let's dive a little deeper into the concept of stretch experiences. What exactly is a stretch experience? So in order to explain that, I'm going to start with the concept of learning zones. So the idea here is that in order to learn successfully, we must be challenged, but challenged appropriately. So this model has 3 zones, and starting with the comfort zone, think about a time when, or think about something that you can do with your eyes closed. You know it inside and out. That's when you're in your comfort zone. And this is where you can perform very well from. This is where you can also kind of rest and reflect. So it's an important zone to spend some time in, but staying in this zone can actually prevent you from developing or growing in your career. On the other end of the spectrum is the panic zone, which, as you can probably guess, is not a good place to be. You know, this is when you're in a situation that is far beyond what you're familiar with or what you can reasonably be expected to learn and manage. It's damaging, it's demotivating. When you're in this zone, your brain essentially shuts down to learning. But in between these two is, you know, the sweet spot for learning, and that's the learning zone or the growth zone. This is where you're challenged to learn new skills and your abilities are stretched, but not to the point of overwhelm. So that's where we get that term, stretch experiences. So a stretch experience is, you know, an experience in which you're uncomfortable and you may not be sure that you're going to be successful at the end of that experience, but you're able to learn along the way and kind of process that learning. Being in the zone might feel intimidating at first, but as you learn the new skills, they then pass into your comfort zone. One of my colleagues would use the metaphor of a traffic light for this model, and I think it's a really helpful view of it. So if you think of a traffic light, green light is your comfort zone, everything is great, you're cruising along. You have the yellow light, that's your learning zone. You approach with caution, you're kind of very aware of what's around you. And then the red light is your panic zone, and your brain kind of slams on the brakes in that moment. So we all probably know what our comfort zone is, but I found that for me, sometimes separating the learning from the panic zones can be a little tricky. I struggled with it. And, you know, I think the most important thing I've taken from this model is that it's okay to be uncomfortable. And in fact, it's a good sign. I used to interpret being uncomfortable as something being wrong, and then kind of create this self-induced panic and sometimes even quit whatever I was trying to do. But, you know, this model showed me that that's not what it means. And, you know, it's actually okay to be uncomfortable. This is good. This means I'm learning and I'm growing. So today I try to reframe that feeling, you know, when I'm doing something new as a growing pain. And that helps me stay focused more on the learning and not get so caught up in my feelings about what's happening. So overall, this model shows that when we think about experiential learning, the goal is to move from the comfort zone to the learning zone while avoiding that panic zone. The theory of experiential learning itself comes out of the work of David Kolb, who said that learning is a process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. Now that sounds straightforward, but according to the work of Nobel Prize winning scientist Daniel Kahneman, each day we'll have 20,000 moments. And he defines a moment as a few seconds in which your brain records an experience. So that is a ton of experiences, and there's no way our brain can process it all, let alone learn from it. So experiences themselves clearly aren't learning. We need to take steps to transfer the experience into learning. And that's where Kolb's model of experiential learning comes into play. So to start with, we do something, we have an experience, or we reinterpret an existing experience. We then review and reflect on the experience. And in particular, we focus on anything inconsistent between our kind of experience and current understanding of the world or of ourselves. And then out of these reflections, we get a new idea. We draw some kind of conclusion or a hypothesis we've essentially learned from the experience. But what's really important about Kolb's model is he doesn't stop there. You know, it's not enough to just have that idea. In order to complete the cycle of learning, we actually need to go out and apply it. We need to experiment with a new behavior, a different way of showing up in the world. We need to test out what we've learned. And once we do that, you'll see the cycle starts over again. So this is ongoing, active, iterative development. And you can do this for pretty much any skill you're trying to develop. I'll go through this quickly, kind of using the example of me giving the talk tonight so you can have a concrete example. So starting at the top here, I am having an experience. For me, this is a stretch experience because I am definitely out of my comfort zone when it comes to public speaking. And then after this talk, I will reflect on how it went. I might hear from some of you, get some feedback, that would be helpful. And then I'll take all of that and figure out what I learned and what I want to do differently next time. And the most critical thing is that I actually apply that, whatever I learned, that information, to the next time I give a talk. And then the cycle will repeat over again. So that's the framework for experiential learning. Now that I've walked through some of the leadership development frameworks I was learning and using in my work, I want to switch gears for a moment and talk about the design process. So there's a lot of kind of different models and ways to visualize the process, but at its core, there's really just a few phases. So there's a phase where we are discovering insight into the problem. We're interpreting our findings, developing frameworks. We're then setting our direction, identifying opportunities, generating ideas, potential solutions and prototypes. And then we test out those solutions and ultimately deliver something that works. So once we put something out there in the world, the cycle starts over again. So this is another iterative process. It's fluid and dynamic, and we're often shifting back and forth between the concrete and the abstract, between analysis and synthesis, and between thinking and making. So as I started to learn about this design process, it all sounded very familiar to me, and I began to see a lot of parallels between the model of experiential learning and the design process itself. This piqued my curiosity, and through my studies, I came across a model for innovation that started to connect the dots for me. And that model looked something like this, starting with some axes and then adding on the phases into the quadrants. And hopefully now this model is starting to remind you all of the experiential learning model that I just walked through. In fact, if I layer Kolb's model onto this design process, you can see how well these frameworks, in fact, do line up with each other. So that's great, but what does it all mean and how do I use this insight? So my curiosity led me to the following conclusions. At its core, the design process is fundamentally about learning. And this makes a lot of sense. It's a really effective way to create new products, services, and experiences. Learning is also critical to approaches that we use in our day-to-day work, such as Lean and Agile, where we focus on what's the smallest thing you can build and put out in the world to learn from. So as designers, we're comfortable applying a learning process to our work, but how comfortable are we applying this process to ourselves in our own careers and our own development? Have we even thought of it as a possibility? So my goal in sharing and walking through these frameworks tonight is to show you that your own development is highly approachable wherever you are in your career or in your life. And as a designer, you already have the skills and the tools you need to work on this. They just need to be slightly reframed. So in closing, I'd like to share some key takeaways. These are things I've learned through my experience transitioning from working in leadership development to design. And I've held on to them and try to work on them, or at least remember them on a day-to-day basis. So number one, leadership, like design, is an action. You can lead from wherever you are in your career and grow your leadership skills. Look for stretch experiences outside of your comfort zone. Find opportunities where you can use your skills in a different way or build new skills or take on more responsibility. Also keep in mind that the flip side of this may be saying no to opportunities that keep you in your comfort zone. Or if you can't say no, at least try to find a way to craft it into a stretch experience. Take time to process and translate your experiences into learning. Having the experience isn't enough. You need to give yourself the time and space to reflect and pull the learning out of the experience and then apply it. Apply a design approach to your own development As a designer, you already have the tools and you know how to work with this process. If there's something you're working on or a piece of feedback you've received, treat it like you would a design project. Go through the phases of the process and continue to iterate. Remember that the goal of experimentation is to learn. I found it most helpful to think of leadership development as a series of little experiments. Some will succeed and some will fail, and that's expected. The point is to learn, apply the learning, and try again. Don't let what you perceive as a failure stop you. It's really just part of the process. And like the design process, it's often messy. And last but not least, build your own learning community. You want to surround yourself with people you can learn from, who inspire you, who hold you accountable, and who are also working on their own development. I've learned and grown so much through relationships with others, and this was especially important as I was transitioning into design. And I know for a fact I wouldn't be here today where I am in my career without the support of so many, including the Philly Chi community. So before I wrap up, I wanted to just share kind of the sources and inspiration I drew from for tonight's talk. And with that, thank you all for listening. I'm happy to take any questions. And also you can feel free to reach out with any feedback or just to connect on LinkedIn or Twitter.
All right, thanks so much, Megan. I love that connection between the leadership framework and the design framework. That's so interesting and perfect for your path. And I thought it was very appropriate since you're coming back to where you were the leader of Philly Chi not too long ago.
Yeah, Philly Chi was in the realm of stretch experiences for me, for sure.
Yeah,
Great
I can
experience.
relate to that.
Yeah.
I see one question popping into the chat here. We're almost at time, but the first one I see is, how do you find that your right hand to help accelerate your pathway to excellence? I'm not sure if I understand that one, sorry. There might have been a typo in that, Tom. Oh, cooperation, okay. So how do you find that cooperation helps accelerate your pathway to excellence?
Yeah, that is, so I think that's really important. That wasn't an area I focused on for this talk, but definitely if I'm understanding cooperation in terms of, I talked at the end about kind of having this learning community, and, the way I envision that is your community is really people who are at all different phases in the career, right? So you can have folks who are mentors, you also have peers, and then you can also reach out to folks who are maybe a little more junior than you. So I think that's really important. But I definitely didn't have enough time to kind of go into that tonight.
Great, thanks, Megan. I think in the interest of time, I'll probably move on to Mike at this point, but thank you so much. There is one question in the Q&A, it looks like. So if you would be able to answer that. But thanks so much, Megan. Mike, I'll kick it over to you and to wrap us up, and then we'll do our raffle. So everyone stick around to the end.
Let me share my screen here. Good?
Yep, looks great.
Excellent. Cool. Well, thank you. It's been a while since I've done a Philly Chi talk, but I think it's organizations like this that really sort of bring the community together. So really thankful to be a part of it. Full disclosure, a couple sort of points of context here. I am a big David Bowie fan, but I am probably not an expert. So if any of your questions are about like details and discography or any of that stuff, I'm probably not the person. What I am very interested in, though, is sort of the many phases of Bowie's career. I'm at a point in my own career where, I'm really sort of looking at next steps in evolution. And I've been constantly impressed with how someone like Bowie was able to continually sort of evolve his career. What I'm going to do is sort of talk about his career and then sort of tie that back to my own professional journey. But you know, I've been a design and UX professional now for over 20 years, and I've been running my own business since 2003. So, you know, a lot of what I've sort of experienced is even just the evolution of the industry, and it's been very interesting. A couple things just to kind of start here. I want to talk about sort of the relationship between curiosity and creativity. You know, Megan sort of hit on this, and some of the curiosity models sort of hit on this as well. But there's this sort of idea of knowledge gathering, right? But there's also this need to sort of take the knowledge and apply it, right? And to really sort of look at making the connections and the information to really create something. One of the things that I find interesting now, in particular in my career, is that I'm experiencing sort of as you get older, things like responsibility. You know, I have business, 2 kids. It sort of starts to take priority over things like exploration. But that doesn't mean you can't create, and it doesn't mean that you know, can't still be curious. So I started looking into this, and I found a study on Psychology Today. So not a very in-depth study, but still an interesting one. Where they did this at Ohio State, and they looked at 31 Nobel Prize winners in the field of economics and studied sort of the relationship between being creative and, you know, essentially how old you were. And, you know, the idea wasn't necessarily that you were more creative as you're younger. I mean, if you think about musicians and like their best albums come out in their 20s and 30s and then they sort of fall off after that. The idea was, you know, what kind of innovator are you? So there's this idea of being a conceptual innovator. Those who challenge conventional wisdom tend to come up with ideas, new ideas sort of spontaneously. And they sort of saw that as being sort of that type of innovator being younger. These are people like Picasso and Einstein. And then there's this idea of being an experimental innovator, which was sort of appealing to me. Those who sort of build on their knowledge throughout their life and find innovative ways to apply that knowledge. And I really think that has, especially in the current state of my life, has really started to hit me. But as I look at both of these sort of camps, what's interesting about Bowie is I feel like he sort of fell into both of these camps. As, you know, just sort of starting out and kind of going through this journey, you know, he started his career young. You know, he was 16 when he kind of went out and became a professional musician. But he wasn't just a musician, he was an artist, he was a designer. He was exploring a lot of things, didn't experience a lot of commercial success right away, but was involved in so many different things. And you know, in my own career, when I started out in 2000. I worked for a branding agency up in New York, and it was sort of this interesting sort of multidisciplinary design firm. And I guess at that point, especially early in my career, I would have taken like any cool design job. But that one in particular was awesome because we did everything from package design to branding to license kits to, we started this where I got into interactive and web development and even some application design. So what was interesting about that, and what I see in Bowie's life is, you know, these early sort of experiences really painted a picture for like the wide array of opportunities that were provided to him as he kind of went through his life. And honestly, had I not experienced all that, I don't know that I would have kind of gone down the paths that I went down as well. Also, what's interesting to me is there was this interesting moment in Bowie's life where he went through this mime phase where he decided he was going to try to be a mime for a while. And you know, at first when I put this together, I thought the lesson was going to be, hey, we all make mistakes. But the reality is he actually learned a lot from this. And it actually painted a very big picture for character development, stage presence, a lot of the things that influenced his life later when, you know, we got into more like the Ziggy Stardust phase, which I'll get to later. But it was very interesting and actually very impactful. You know, I think about things that I've done. That first job I was talking about, I got fired from that job. I won't get into the details on it. We'll say it was creative differences. But what was interesting about it was while I would have
done things differently, looking back on it, I learned a lot from it, and not just what my mistakes were, but what my interests were and what the things that I wanted to sort of explore, and not just from a work perspective, but from a sort of life perspective, a situational perspective. And I think, you know, you see a lot of this with Bowie as it sort of influences him as well. So 1969 Space Oddity comes out. It's his first commercial success. It was directly inspired by Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. The name is, you know, obviously a little bit of a play on words there. The song was actually released 5 days before the Apollo 11 launch. So, you know, when we think about inspiration and we think about creativity, moments in time and being a part of these sort of big events, they drive a lot of change and they influence a lot of creativity. For me, you know, when I was, so I got fired from that job. That was in New York. It was 2 weeks before 9/11. I come back to Philly. I think I'm, you know, going to go get the awesome agency job and open up all these opportunities. And then all of a sudden, the bottom dropped out of the market. Nobody was hiring for a while, and it was really a challenge. And I imagine many people are kind of going through that still right now with the pandemic, right? This is a really interesting moment in time. One would say extremely challenging, and it certainly has been for us as an agency, but it's also a moment of inflection and opportunity. And I think that's what you're seeing here with Bowie. He sort of was very inspired by these things that were happening around him, and he was interested in really making that a part of his creative journey. And I'm interested in how much I've seen happen even just in the last 12 months with people shifting careers and new startups that have come around, telemedicine, e-commerce, online payment platforms, influx of investments into Black and minority owned businesses. And, you know, a lot of that would not have happened had a lot of these other catalysts not occurred. So I think reacting to your environment is a key part of curiosity and creativity. Okay, 1972. So it sort of springboards off of the Space Oddity success, and this to me was probably the pinnacle of his career. And it's early, right? Ziggy Stardust comes out, and it's this super interesting movement and moment in time where he not only creates a genre of music in this idea of sort of glam rock, but he creates a whole persona and a character. He's sort of the definition of method acting, right? He literally was giving interviews as Ziggy Stardust, to the point at which actually later in life, he mentioned that it affected his sanity quite a bit. He had a hard time separating the character from reality. But what was interesting about this was really challenging convention, not just from a musical perspective, but from a performance perspective, gender identity, right? He was starting to rethink what fashion looked like and how that played a role into music. And coming out of the 60s, I mean, there was these preconceived notions about what music was and was supposed to be, particularly rock. And he was really turning it on its head. You know, on my own journey, I think about, you know, what the internet was early. From 2000 to 2005, I mean, it was the Wild West. We were using Flash left and right, and there were no rules. There were no standards. It was basically online advertising, sort of at its best. And then things started to shift and things started to happen, and we all had to sort of take advantage of it. When we started O3 in 2005, it was really more around sort of this idea of like brand communications in the digital space. And then all of a sudden, you know, things started happening and changing, and we started to take advantage of that. I think it's the combination, a lot of the ideas that you have as a younger professional to find that sort of voice of your own and really sort of achieve that at some point. And I think it's an interesting moment in time here for Bowie, where he really kind of found himself. And I know for me personally, there was sort of an early stage in that as well, where I, you know, can sort of relate. All right, 1975. So this is actually probably the most interesting moment in his life for me, because this is the first time, he's got this huge commercial success, and he could have been a glam rocker for the rest of his life and been, you know, the father of that movement and taken it on in various directions and done all sorts of things. But he shifted. He made a huge risk and decided that he was going to go seek out this really interesting musical genre called soul in a place called Philadelphia. And he came to Philly and he wrote Young Americans. And, you know, at Sigma Sound Studios up on Broad Street with Gamble and Huff. What's fascinating to me about that is the risk he took. He didn't need to do that. He decided that it was worthwhile. And I think what you're seeing a lot of with Bowie is how tapped into the world around him he is. One of the things I'll say about the work that I've seen done over the last several years is how much it has been a reaction to what business has needed, what culture has needed in the work that we do. You know, early on, it was all just web design, right? The web designer was the architect and the designer and the developer. And then that started to fragment out. And then things like Facebook and MySpace became a thing. And all of a sudden, the internet wasn't a piece of a business, it was the business, right? So I think you start to see this sort of combination of sort of reacting to the world around you and really developing sort of skill set, being inspired by, being curious about what's next, and sort of these sort of continual innovations. More recently, I think about where we're as an agency, and we've had some pretty big shifts, but thinking about things like accessibility, thinking about things like customer experience versus user experience, connecting the dots on larger ecosystems because that's what people need. And we're sort of tapping into that overall. All right, so coming off of Young Americans, he makes this second shift. And you know, maybe it's a third or fourth, depending on how you're looking at it. But he decides to move to Berlin and really tap into this like German sound. We're talking about a lot of synthesizers. It's sort of the precursor of a lot of the 80s sound that came out, right? All of us, I think I heard on like VH1 Behind the Music many years ago that, you know, they kind of got the synthesizers and they threw out the manuals and they just figured out how they could like work it into their music. And I think it was really interesting and also, again, a huge risk. Now, at this point, he's a huge success. So, you know, maybe he can take more risks there. But I think what was also interesting, this is also when his drug problems became really prevalent. And he went through a lot of turmoil. This was actually a pretty rough point in his life. But this is also arguably, at least in my opinion, when I think some of his most creative and interesting work came out. Maybe not his most commercially viable, depending on how you look at it, but certainly I think the most interesting. And I think it's at times when we are struggling where some of those biggest sort of aha moments can come around. You know, this past year in particular, I know for us as a business, you know, it's been a challenge, but I think it's created also a lot of insight and a lot of opportunity for us to sort of refocus around you know what we're doing as a business. And if I think back to 08 and 09 and the financial crisis, similarly, that's when we made a big shift from sort of general web design into sort of this more user experience function. Similarly, 2013, 2014, we had a rough time there too. And that's also when, you know, we made a big shift into product design, and that was going to be our focus. So I think that it's interesting when I think about sort of the relationship between challenge, curiosity, and creativity, and there's really sort of an interconnectedness there. All right, the 80s. So I'll be the first to say that, you know, while Bowie had a lot of success in the 80s, this is also the time where I think he started shifting a little bit from that front side of that model, right? Being the conceptual innovator to really becoming more of this experimental innovator. I think this is where Bowie became basically an icon for hire, right? A lot of collaboration. This is when songs like Under Pressure came out and work he did with Queen. You know, I find that this is where creativity starts to mature. And this is actually something that I've sort of experienced the last few years in my own career where, you know, I'm not the one doing the work. I'm the one sort of facilitating the work. And it's been interesting. But it's also a different kind of creativity. It's where all of a sudden you move from being inspired by the task at hand and maybe the client you're working with in our case, to the team you're working with and what they can sort of provide us and bring to the table. More recently, we've been very interested in AI and machine learning. And my business partner and I talked a lot about developing our own AI practice, and that just wasn't that feasible. One, it's very expensive to find data scientists, but two, just core to our business, it's hard to weave in new services. So we ended up creating a ventures program, and we actually invest in various companies, and one of which was an AI agency, and that's been a very successful partnership. It allows us to pull them into the mix when we have these opportunities, talk a lot about not just data and analytics, but what we can do with that data to create predictive systems. And this idea of collaboration, I think, is very prevalent in those relationships. So what's also interesting to me is kind of where BOWIE goes from here. So 80s and 90s, he starts to get, so he's always creating music and some very interesting music at that, but commercially, again, not as successful as the work he did in the 70s. But this is also when he starts doing a lot of other things. He was always an actor, always a performer. So, he was in movies and film in various ways kind of throughout his life. But this is when a lot of these big commercial successes come around. So I was a kid in the 80s, but I very much remember Labyrinth and Jim Henson and the Muppets and this idea of, taking this icon who is already a character in many ways and sort of putting him on screen and him sort of leveraging that, right? He took this world that he was in and he started to look at adjacent opportunities. I think about next steps as a designer, and in the last few years, I've gotten really out of design and far more into strategic work. Now I lead up innovation, and it's scary. It's a whole new thing. It's a whole new challenge. It's my stretch challenge, or however Megan referred to that, right? But what's interesting about it is it's still relatable to the things that I've already done. And I think that, as we start to age, we can be a little more afraid to try those things. But, that's why this is very inspirational to me, because I think about, not just the big shifts, but really leveraging these things I have done in the past as being sort of, creating a roadmap for the things I'll be doing in the future.
Mike, just a quick time check. Got about 2 or 3 more minutes here.
Yep, I'm wrapping up right now. So, last is which I think is funny because it kind of brings me back to the beginning. It's kind of where BOWIE ended up, sort of late in life. He really got into the internet. He became a web designer and created BowieNet, which I remember when Napster came out, it was sort of another streaming service. But what was interesting about this and what's very inspiring to me now is just this idea of continually growing and constantly reinventing yourself. And particularly where I'm at right now, work to me is about still staying tapped into the world around you and not just learning from your mistakes, but really never dwelling on the past and really looking forward to sort of what comes tomorrow. I think about, what's possible every day. And I think that, it's careers like this that are truly inspiring to me. And I feel like have really sort of paved the path for things to learn from, particularly as I think about next steps. So, all right, that's all I got. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mike. That was so great. I loved hearing this recap of David Bowie's life. Have you heard the quote that he said about the internet around that last time period? It was something like, I think the potential of the internet is going to be unimaginable.
Yeah, it was actually the tail end of the quote that I put up here. But yeah, it was remarkable and scary, like nothing before. Yeah, he was definitely ahead of his time, which was interesting. He'd sort of foreseen a lot of these things as they were coming around, which as I was sort of getting into a lot of his background was super compelling.
That's awesome. I'm not seeing questions here, but I am seeing some kudos from the audience. Appreciation for your talk here. We were talking in our Philly Chi chat about your slides. They're very well done too.
Also, the thing I don't get to design all the time, so when I get to put a deck together, I try to really take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mike. If anyone has questions, please feel free to post them, and if you see any pop up, feel free to jump in, Mike.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you so much. Raisha, if you are ready, we can do the raffle and wrap up the event here.
Yep. So we have all our raffle winners, and we will follow up with you by email and send you the physical book, no matter where you are in the world. But also a heads up, it might take a little bit of more time than usual due to COVID. So Ben, do you want to get back to the presentation for the book?
Sorry, I'm trying to, here we go.
So the first book, which is designed for kids, that goes to Sam Morris. And the second one is Living in Information, which goes to Mark Graves. And the third one, which is Figure It Out, goes to Mark Angelo. So moving on to the World IA raffle winners. So the first one, which is the Rosenfeld ebook bundle, that goes to Veronica Lynn. And the second one is Azure Team subscription. That is for Rachel Walski. And the last, we have two winners for the last one. So the Abbey covered book one goes to David Nicholson, and the second one goes to Randeep Pahar. So as I mentioned again before, I'll do it again, like we'll follow up by email and send you, and we'll coordinate about the delivery process. So now I'll pass it on to Ben to wrap up.
Okay, thanks, Raisha. And a quick mention, World IA Day has also coordinated a bunch of discount codes that all of us have access to as attendees of World IA Day. So we'll be sending that out in a post-event email. So keep your eyes peeled for that. There's also some grand prizes I believe you can enter to win if you'd like. But yeah, so we hope that you enjoyed tonight's talk and want to thank again our amazing speakers, our event sponsor, Eastern Standard, all of our annual sponsors, and each of you for sticking it out till the very end of the event. Really appreciate you being here, your time. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay connected.